Well,
Thanks,
Jehmu
David.
Greene disagrees with all this. She says without government programs, poverty would be actually worse than it is now. She is a former advisor to Hillary Clinton. Jehmu, let me just quote Tom Sowell. I'm sure you know the economist Tom Sowell. Started out as worked his way over to the free market, grew up in poverty in Harlem, has the cred to speak about poverty, and he says the poor are the human shields behind whom advocates of ever bigger spending for ever bigger government advance toward their goal. He's talking about you there.
I wouldn't say that he's talking about me, but David,
Not personally, but in general.
I want to thank you for this conversation because I think we have not been talking about all of the people who are in poverty and especially even the working poor as much as we should have in the political conversation. These numbers are devastating, and it's clear that no number of tax breaks or additional spending is going to cure the institutional structural problems with our financial system that have so many people, dealing with this situation right now.
So you blame the financial system for the increase in poverty?
Well, I think that there are institutional barriers that create a culture of poverty that we have to address. But clearly, in looking at the current crisis that we're in right now, you can find that 4.5 million more people would be in poverty if it wasn't for the American Recovery Act that was passed a couple of years ago.
How effective
state by state,
general?
local, community by community, you can find government programs that have helped make sure that not even more people have fallen off that cliff.
When you add up and it has been trillions of dollars since the war on poverty began. I'm old enough to remember LBJ and the war on poverty's beginnings. Trillions of dollars have not really been effective in terms of preventing this huge growth in the poverty rate. So you have to evaluate these programs based on their effectiveness. And if you do that, wouldn't you be for getting rid of some of them?
Well, I do think that we have to look at how all of the government programs that are part of our safety net, how effective they are. And we see very clearly Social Security or unemployment insurance. Social Security specifically stopped 14 million seniors from being in poverty last year. That's a significant number that we can't deny. Now,
we can deny, we can question it, Jehmu. We can't always say exactly what would not have happened had we not done this. But what we can say is that with all of the government spending, again, trillions of dollars worth, we have this horrendous poverty rate. So clearly there are problems with these government programs. By the way, another thing Tom Sowell has done, the economist, he added up all of the government programs, added up the dollar amount, everything from the food stamps to general welfare, et cetera, and found that if you just took all of that money together and just wrote a check to every individual in poverty, their income would go up to $75,000 per person. So if you just got rid of the middleman, just get rid of all these government programs, write the poor people a check, you'd bring them out of poverty. It's the middleman that bothers me, the bureaucrats in the middle. I grew up in D.C. It's a huge bureaucracy that handles all this money.
I was born in D.C. as well.
So you know very well what it's like.
No one is in support of more bureaucracy here, but I think we have to look at the facts, whether it's Social Security or unemployment benefits. The Great Recession has a lot to do with the record numbers of people we're now seeing, with the numbers that came out today. That, again, is devastating. More and more people are in poverty. More children are in poverty. More elderly are in poverty. And more working people, people who are working 40 hours a week, are in poverty. And we can point to some of the factors started by the Great Recession that increased these numbers, but these inequalities existed before the Great Recession, and it's important to understand the culture of poverty, whether it's funding for education, family planning. There are many things that have not been done to really address the institutional
There have been two other times in the past 30 years when we have had employment rate this high. One was in 1983 and one was in 1993. Something about these threes that maybe is unlucky, the unlucky numbers. But the fact is that in 1983, President Reagan really diminished the amount of money that we spent on government programs. You were probably protesting if you were there at the time. However, we brought down the unemployment rate. We brought down not only the unemployment rate in America, but also the poverty rate. 1993, we had a huge overhaul in the welfare system. And again, the poverty rate came down. In other words, the less we get government involved, it seems the fewer number of people we have in poverty.
I saw firsthand as a young child the impact of those cuts, and my parents working in healthcare, the many people who were kicked out of mental health institutions because states didn't have funding, and the problems that
But the
caused.
poverty rate came down.
The reality is we have to address the institutionalized issues that are behind poverty, and we also have to have a strong, robust economy. And I think that's why it's also important to look at other programs that have been put on the table, like President Obama's jobs plan. When you look at the pathways to work plan that really focuses on youth unemployment and job training programs and the long-term unemployed, that's when you start to be able to chip away at it.
Jehmu, we got to leave it at that. But we do agree that what we need to do is get the economy moving again. I think we all agree on